Hey, what's up everybody? We're back with another fly tying tutorial in our dry fly tying series. Today we are going to be working on one of our brown drake patterns. This is another spin-off of some traditional flies that were developed in Michigan for fishing big brown trout. And we like to tie this fly on a little bit unconventional style hook. That's what makes it partially a custom fly. But for the length of the body here, you'll see a lot of people tie these flies on a 2 or a 3x long shank, and we have some of those hooks here. I'm going to show you the difference, what those look like. And the reason we do not like to tie on this particular hook, the traditional style hook, is because it's got a very narrow hook gap, and we want a little bit wider hook gap that just gives us a little bit better hookups on these larger fish. And then also you can see the difference in the gauge of the wire the hook is made out of. This one is a little bit thinner and this one's a little bit heavier, but the length of the shank is exactly the same. This is a size 10 2x, and this is a size 8 standard nymph style hook. And I can tell you the number on that particular hook. I got it written down over here. So on that particular hook, it is a TMC 3769, and that's that size 8. And this one here is a size 10 2x. And again, if you can find that same size hook, if you wanted a lighter shank with a wider hook gap, I would suggest looking for something with a wider hook gap. We change a little bit of how this fly is tied because we need to add a little bit more buoyancy to the hook, since it is a little bit heavier. So what we'll do, we'll get our size 8 TMC hook into our vise here. Hopefully all of you out there are getting ready for dry fly, big bug dry fly season. I know we've been doing pretty well lately on smaller flies like sulfurs and whatnot. So we are using a dark brown 8/0 uni thread, and we like to use the dark brown because we're going to use this for the ribbing of our fly. We are going to go back and forth over the shank, and this is basic Michigan style dry flies. You know, you're using deer hair, body hair. We're going to use a pheasant tail for the actual tail of the fly, and then we have a blended dubbing that we're going to use as our underbody. And we blended this dubbing. You can use a standard yellow dubbing if you'd like. If you'd like to know this recipe, just shoot us a message and we can get that to you. It's a blend of 4 different types of materials. So we're going to take a clump off of our deer hair, and we want a very, very small clump because this is going to be technically an underbody to the fly. We're going to throw that into our hair stacker, and I'm going to show you this very, very sparse, very small amount of deer hair we're going to use for this underbody. I know a lot of people were asking how we like to tie our dry flies, and figured for this week's weekly tutorial we would just show you. So we lined up all of our tips. We got one of the hairs pointing backwards. I'll go ahead and pull that out here. So we got all our tips aligned. We're going to make this exactly the length of the shank, so we're going to measure where the tips are just past the bend, I'll transfer to the other hand, and that's where I'm going to make that cut over the trash can. Double check my length, and I'm going to bring my thread up to just behind the eye of the hook, and I'm going to tie that clump down. I'll get one wrap over top of it, another wrap, and then I'll pull down, and that's going to let that hair flare out, and then I'll make even wraps going all the way back to the bend of the hook. And this just adds a little bit more buoyancy to this fly. It's going to trap some air bubbles. That is strictly because we are using this extra large shanked hook, or I'm sorry, extra heavy gauged wire on that hook. So the next thing we're going to take is just 2 or 3, you could do even up to 4, just strands of fibers off of a pheasant tail. And we like the tails to be the full length of the body, including the tips that we have tied in here of the deer hair. So we're going to transfer that back. Go ahead and tie that in, bring our thread forward, cut off those ends, and that's going to be our tail. So we're going to bring our thread back to where we just tied those pheasant tails in to the base of our fly. It's going to be basically directly above our barb, if you have a barb on your hook. And we are going to now add in our dubbing. So we're going to take a little bit of this wax, and we're using just a basic fly maker's wax, and we're going to pull our thread out. We're going to give that wax or that thread a good coating of wax, just like that. And then we'll take a little bit, just a small pinch or a clump of this blended dubbing, and we're going to just lay it out on our thread, just like so. If you can barely see that, just sticking to the thread from the wax. And we're going to make a nice thin noodle, and we want it to be thinner towards the back of the fly to help build the taper of the bug, because the bugs have a natural taper to them. I'm going to get that noodle onto our thread, starting right back at the base of the tail, and just wrap that underbody forward. And we're covering up all that deer hair that we laid down at the beginning, and like I said, that's just to add the buoyancy to the fly so we can float this fly as long as possible. So now we have a off-colored yellow body, the little bit of sparkle in there from our custom blend. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to back the top of this fly with deer hair. So right across the top of the back, and we're going to match it right up with the lengths of the tips of the other deer hair that's on the underbody. So we'll take another little clump of hair. It's about the same amount, maybe just a touch more of hair. We're going to get all of them loose ends out of the hair, throw it into our stacker. Give it a few taps. And I like to twist, and if you can see, I'm holding my stacker on an angle. It's a little tip here. So I'm holding my stacker on an angle like this, and I'm twisting the end of my stacker to make sure all those tips are aligned. And then I pull the end of my stacker off, and I can just grab the tips of that deer hair just like that. And then they're in a nice, straight, even line, just like that. So again, we're going to measure these to the same length as the other deer hair that's on the underside, and then we're going to snip it right where our thread is, and it's about maybe 1/8 of an inch behind the eye. I'm going to go ahead and throw that over my trash can and snip that off using small scissors here today. So need to snip it right there, just show you. make a little bit of a mess here. I could sweep it up here in a little bit. So then I'm going to trap those fibers right on top of the yellow underbody. And we want all of this deer hair to ride on the very top to give it that body a two-tone look. This is very similar to what the hex fly looks like, except it's smaller. And you can tie the hex fly in this same pattern if you'd like. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just got a few fibers sticking out. I'm going to go ahead and trim. So we can keep that taper to the fly. So that's your body. Now we're going to take another clump of deer hair, because this is a parachute style fly that we tie. And it's about the same amount that you took for the last clump, maybe just a touch more. And we're going to just get all those loose ends out, throw it in our stacker. And there's a few steps on this fly that you could be skipping, and we'll point those out. Like, we're going to throw in a couple of small partridge feathers for wings. If you wanted to just make a parapost and wrap hackle around this post, you can just do it like that and call it a day. And this could be what would be your wing. So I'm going to measure the tips from the base of the fly, not all the way back, but the base of the fly, and that's where I want my tips to line up. I'll transfer over to my hand, and I'm going to snip right at the eye of the hook. Check my measurement. And then we're going to tie this in right on top, about that 1/8 of an inch behind, like so. I'm still holding the tips of this parapost, and I'm pulling it up so I can get my fly wrapped around behind it just one time. And then I'm going to treat this just like it was a post for a parachute style fly. All parachute style flies are tied basically the same, just like that. Again, you can just take your hackle feathers, and you can tie your hackle feathers, finish that fly, and just put a parapost or a parachute style fly together and call it a day. We're going to take a little extra step and throw in some wings, which give this fly, I feel like, a dual purpose. And that way you can fish this on a spinner, on a spinner fall, or you can fish it on a fresh hatch. We just prepped our feather, and all we did, and I'll show you on the other grizzly, but we're using a ginger colored grizzly and a natural colored grizzly, and we're going to use both of those feathers to post, to parachute and post this post up. So I'm going to throw in my ginger grizzly, and I'm tying it right in front of that parachute. And then I'll just clean it up, and I'll bring my thread all the way back to the base of my parachute. And once you get a couple of these flies under your belt, it does get faster. We're just going nice and slow so we can show all of you who want to learn how to tie this fly, so you can follow along. We're going to go ahead and throw that other feather in right in the front here. And if any of you out there who are watching have questions, don't be afraid to drop a comment below and ask a question, and if we don't answer it live, we'll go back and answer those questions for everybody. So we got both those feathers tied in. This one's tied in upside down. Preferably I'd have it the other way. That way it's pushing against the water. I could just leave it. It's not that big a deal, but you can see there's a concave to the feather, right? And the shiny side is on the top. So we're going to tie that feather in like so that way it rides and it pushes against the water and just helps keep that fly afloat a little bit longer. We also treat our flies. So if you want to add even more buoyancy to the fly, you can treat the fly. So the next thing we're going to add in, and this is the optional part. You don't have to do this. You can just parachute this fly and call it a day. But we like to use kind of a speckled color, white partridge feather. We're just going to take 2 of those. And this is something we do on our own flies, and we don't do them for all of our flies, but we got the extra time and the material here. There's other options you can use as well. Like if you don't have partridge, if you have mallard flank is good. It's got a natural oil in the feather. It does float really well. Like I said, we're going to treat these flies, so it's not going to matter too much. And talk about proportions, I'm trying to get the feather to be about the base of the body. We're going to lose a little bit of length when we post this wing up. So I got 2 feathers here. I got the feathers, the butt ends stroked back, and I'm going to cut right there, and it's going to create a little bit of a triangle on those butt sections. And we do that because it helps the thread grab these stems. And we'll trim off each side just like that. Take 1 feather at a time, and we're going to put them in with a pair of hackle pliers. I'll show you how I prefer to do this. And you want the concave side of the fly or the feather to be facing away from the center of the body, so that way when we put these wings down in position, they're pushing against the water just the same as the hackle. So we're gonna bring our thread back to the base of this post. I'm going to go ahead and get 1 wrap around the post. I'm going to grab the feathers and the post. I'm going to come back up behind it here. I'm just going to wrap 1, 2 times. And that second wrap is actually going to hold my feather down. So I'm going to put my feather right at the base of that post, and I'm going to wrap right around that base of that feather. I'll give it 2 full wraps, and we can pull it into position by grabbing onto it. If it's turned a little bit, don't stress out. We're going to fix that at the end. And then grab the other feather, do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to just lay it right against the post. And wrap right around the whole post. And then you can go ahead and get in there and trim out the excess stems off of those feathers. So that's the tricky part. And if you don't want to put those feathers in, you don't have to. I just think they look nice. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to try to position these feathers where we want them. And I'm just going to keep manipulating those wings until they get in a position the way we want them to lay. So they're pretty close. The next thing we're going to do is going to grab one of our hackles, and we're going to spin over top of the wings, and that's going to help force them down. So pull your wings down and spin that ginger hackle right over top of them a few times. And then go under, and you can post it all the way down. And I'm just passing it from hand to hand. You can use hackle pliers there if you'd like. And then I'm going to go ahead and wrap my thread over my feather, and then I'm going to go under that feather. So let me show you from the other angle here. You can see I'm holding this feather, and I'm going to go under all of the fibers around that post and then go over it. So you go over it, under it a couple times, and it'll hold it right in position. It's not going to go anywhere. So we're going to do the same thing with the grizzly hackle. Pull our wing down, go over top of our wing, and we go over top of the other wing, and then go under it. This one's not, I'm just going to go under because it's not being cooperative here. So go under it once, and then I'll go over it. And if you just did the parapost and you didn't add these wings in, you'd be done with this fly already. So go ahead and just finish off your post. I'm going to hold that feather. I'm going to go around my post with my thread, and I'm going to give it a nice little tug each time, 2 times over top of it, 2 times under everything. And then you can go in and snip out the remainder portions of those feathers. So right now our wings kind of look a little wonky, so we'll kind of just tease them into position. And I'm going to show you how we're going to fix that here. But what we're going to do is now we're going to do a whip finish, but we have an extra large whip finisher tool here. And we're going to whip finish around the post. So we're not actually going to tie it in the front of the fly like you normally would. You're going to actually whip finish the post. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to show you that close up here as well, so you can see me do it again. Typically I would just do it once, but just get your whip finisher and go right around the post. Let's see if I can get. So 4 or 5 times is plenty. And then you can take off the bottom portion of your whip finisher. Take a little bit of any type of glue, and I'm going to lay this actually on my thread. So I got a bunch of beads of glue on my thread, and then I'm going to pull that glue right down in to the base of that parachute. And then just knocked my thread off. And now we're going to take, this is a little bit, adds a little bit of durability, and it's also going to help us manipulate our wings. I'm going to take a little bit of this Solares thin UV cure, and I'm going to put a little amount on the brown thread on the bottom to give it a little bit of durability. Just a little drop. Take your bodkin and smooth it out, and then hit that with your light. And now I'm going to take just a small drop on the tip of my bodkin here of resin, and I'm going to put it right on the base of the chute where that wing is. And I'm going to try to hold it where I want it, and then hit it with the light and see if that'll hold it where I want it. Just like so. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And if you tie it properly, a lot of times you don't even need to do this, but put a little bit of resin where I want that wing to, right at the base of that wing. Pull that wing out where I want it and hit it with my light. I know this is kind of like cheating, but And that's basically it. Any fibers you have sticking out the bottom of your fly, you can go ahead and just trim them up tight. This fly is going to float really nice for you. We put a bunch of durability into it. It's got a nice high post that's visible that you can see. And then you got your splayed wings directly out. And we have this on a heavier gauge hook. We can catch much bigger fish on this fly, because you will get a chance at some bigger fish on this fly pattern. They do like to come up from the bottom and eat it. And that's pretty much it. So if you guys have any questions or comments, go ahead and just drop them below. Follow us on our YouTube page on Tight Lines Entertainment, Instagram at TLE Media, and you can see all the flies that we tie on that page. So again, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you again next week. We're going to do this every single week, generally on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, and go ahead and get to tie up some of these flies, get out and catch some brown trout. Thanks a lot. We'll see you guys